In this lecture, we will look into IAM roles. So, who can access the AWS services? One is user itself, the IAM user. Secondly, we can use our CLI to access the AWS services. And third, we can use any web application to access our AWS services. We can use SDKs to access our AWS services. Now, apart from us, like apart from users, CLI and web application, when the application runs in the AWS, where whatever the services are involved in the application, there are possibilities that all the services will communicate with each other within AWS account itself. But as per the infrastructure, as per the AWS, there one service, like any particular service of AWS is not allowed to communicate with any other service of the AWS. As you can see, there is a lock outside of all the services. Now let's suppose for a single application, your one of the service wants to establish the communication with any other AWS services, like Lambda wants to send the data to databases, like your EC2 wants to access some data from S3, or your EC2 wants to send some data to the CloudWatch. In that situation, how the things will work? Because all the services are locked. So to open this lock, we need a key that is called roles, IAM roles. If let's suppose the EC2 wants to access other services, in that situation, we will be applying the IAM roles on the EC2 instances, and this IAM role will authenticate this EC2 instances, and it will allow this EC2 instances to establish a communication with all the other AWS services. Now coming to the thing, you must be thinking about a single question, like if I'm applying an IAM role on any of the particular services, like here we are applying onto the EC2 instances. In this example, we are applying the IAM role on Lambda functions. So let's suppose I have applied the IAM role on these Lambda functions, but after that, is it possible like Lambda will be able to access each and every services of the AWS? Is it something like that? No. We can control the access of this Lambda function. Like if we want that Lambda functions should establish a communication with RDS only, not with the CloudWatch, not with the S3 bucket, not with the EC2 instances. That is also possible, and that is controlled by the permissions. Now let's suppose this is the EC2 instance we have, and these all are the services which is involved in our application. Now EC2 wants to access only S3 bucket and CloudWatch. In that situation, we will apply the role to the EC2 instance, and with the role we will attach the permission, and in that permission we will be giving the access to the S3 bucket and CloudWatch. We won't be adding the Lambda function and RDS. And after this, if this EC2 wants to access this Lambda and RDS, it won't be able to do it. Now EC2 will be able to access only S3 bucket and CloudWatch, nothing else. Same thing goes for Lambda itself. If Lambda wants to access only CloudWatch and S3, in that situation again we'll have to add the permission to the IAM role, which will be attached above the Lambda function, and this permission will be having access to only S3 bucket and CloudWatch. In that situation, our Lambda function will be able to access only S3 bucket and CloudWatch, not EC2 instance and RDS instance. So overall, just think about that. IAM role is something which will be applied to the service who wants to access any another service. Now let's take an example of EC2 instances. Now if we want to attach a role on EC2 instances, it's not possible. If we are adding the role on EC2 instance also, then also the EC2 instance will not be able to access your AWS cloud. Why? Because AWS treats your personal EC2 instance as a separate entity from AWS. In that situation, even if we are trying to apply the roles with the EC2 instance, the role will not be able to pass its temporary credential to EC2 instance, and by using that temporary credential, EC2 instance will not be able to communicate with the AWS cloud, because IAM role is unable to pass its credentials to EC2 instance. To make that thing possible, we will be using instance profile. Instance profile just wrap the EC2 instance and roles. In this situation, roles passes its temporary credentials to EC2 instance, and EC2 instance uses that temporary credential to access your AWS cloud services. Now let's move to the console and we will see few things in the practical. Okay, so we are on our AWS console. Now you just have to go to EC2 instance and you have to launch the EC2 instance. Here I'll give any of the tag. I'll just put it as a server. Now go down. I'll just quickly launch this EC2 instance, but before that I want to explain you something. First of all, I'll just mention all the subnets and security groups, whatever I want to use. Now, I won't be touching this advanced network configuration. Once you go down, at the bottom you will see an option called advanced details. So inside the advanced details, you will see this option IAM instance profile. What is this? The same thing what I have explained you before. We have to attach an IAM instance profile here. You can't see IAM role option here because there is no way we can attach the IAM role to EC2 instance to access any of the AWS services. We have to attach the IAM instance profile itself. Since we don't have any instance profile, let's create one. You have to just click on create new IAM profile. Now this is the IAM console. Now let's suppose you have to create any kind of role, like role for AWS Lambda, role for RDS, role for any of the AWS services. You have to come to this console and just create the role. Now we are creating a role for EC2 instance because EC2 wants to access S3 bucket or like AWS services. So in that situation, we have to create instance profile, and that would be for EC2 instances. Just click on EC2 instances, click on next. Now we will be giving the access. So let's suppose we are giving the full access of the S3 bucket, means our EC2 instance will be able to access the S3 bucket. Apart from this service, EC2 instance will not be able to access any of the other services. So I'll be giving the name as a EC2 underscore S3. Go down and just click on create role. It will create a role for you. Okay, so once the role has been created, let's move here and let's refresh this. Once you refresh this, you will see your instance profile here. As you can see here, instance-profile / EC2 underscore S3. One more thing I would like to show you here. Just type EC2 underscore S3 and click on the EC2 underscore S3. You will see two different ARNs here. One is the simple role. As you can see, it's a role. And another one you can see is the instance profile. So whenever you are creating any EC2 role from the console manually, your instance profile and your IAM role both gets created together. But whenever you will go for this role creation using CLI command or using APIs, in that situation your instance profile will not be created. You will have to create your instance profile separately, not with the EC2 instance role. Since we have created it manually from the console, both the instance profile and IAM role is created at a time. Now let's go to the EC2 management console, and again I'm not going to attach that instance profile here because I want to show you what happens when you don't attach your EC2 instance with your instance profile. So in the user data, quickly I'll mention just to update our Linux machine. That's it. -y. Let's launch the instances. Okay, so I'll be back once the instances will reach to the running state. Okay, so before we move ahead, let's quickly move to the Lambda console. Since I've already told you about Lambda itself, I'll be launching the Lambda function, and here I'm going to create a new function. So once you go to the Lambda function, you just have to give your function name. I'll put it as a test. Once you go to the permission, you will see you have to attach an execution role to the Lambda function. Execution role is nothing but your IAM role. Now let's suppose what we have seen in our slides. Our Lambda function wants to access S3 bucket and CloudWatch. So we have to attach the role to the Lambda function because Lambda function wants to access other AWS services. So let's create one IAM role for the Lambda function. Just click on create role, select AWS services. Now here you can select Lambda function, and if you click down, you will get all the services names where you can attach your IAM roles. So now we have to attach our IAM role on Lambda function. We'll just click on Lambda, click on next. Now we have to access S3, RDS, whatever you want to access. Just give the full access. Let's suppose I want to access RDS. Just I'll put the full access of the RDS instance. We'll click on next. Here I'll be putting it as an EC2 underscore RDS. Sorry, not EC2, it's a Lambda function. Okay, Lambda function with RDS function. We'll just create a role, and the role will be created now. So the Lambda role has been created. Once we go to the Lambda role, we can see when we created the EC2 instances, at that time two ARN was created. One was for instance profile and another one was for the role. Here we can see only one ARN because apart from EC2 instance, each and every services will have only one ARN. Only EC2 instance will have two. One is for instance profile and another one is for IAM roles. So now again go to the Lambda function, click on use an existing role. Now Okay, so as you can see, we have lambda underscore RDS. So just attach this role whatever we have created now and create the function. Your function will be created with this particular role and lambda will be able to access the RDS instance. Okay, so before that, okay, I won't be creating the function. I'll just delete this lambda role. Make sure that you are deleting each and everything while cleaning up. Whatever you have created, just remove it once your work is done. Now, okay, still our server is initializing, so let's wait for some time. Once it will be back, I'll continue. Okay, so finally our server has been launched and the status check you can check, you can see it's a 2/2 check passed. Just let's click on the server and we'll connect it. Now let's try to access our any of the AWS services using the EC2 instances. So before that, I would like to show you the AWS configure option. As you can see, we don't have any access key ID. I have not given any access key, any secret key. Let's take the reason name as a US East 1 and not format. So we have not provided any kind of credentials to this EC2 instances like access key or secret key using which our EC2 would be able to access the S3 bucket or any of the AWS services. Apart from that, you also might have remembered that we have not provided any kind of instance profile. So now let's try to access our AWS resources. Let's put down the command. So I'll be accessing the VPC details. So you have to put AWS space EC2 space describe hyphen VPCs, enter. So you can see what you can see here. Unable to locate credentials. You can configure credentials by running AWS configure. It says that you just run this AWS configure and set up these credentials, both access key ID and secret key ID. But access key and secret key is the permanent secrets. Okay, but so AWS doesn't recommend that. AWS recommends using IAM roles because IAM roles is having temporary credentials with this, and that credentials gets rotated time to time. So that's why we will be using IAM roles for that, but not the access key and secret key. You can use both. You can either use access key or secret key, or you can use IAM roles. But since IAM roles is more secure, we'll be using IAM roles. Now let's go to the console. Just click on open your instance, click on action, go to security, click on modify IAM role. From here you have to select your instance profile, whatever the profile we have created before, and that was EC2 underscore S3. Click on save. Now let's move to the console, the CLI again, and let's try to execute the same command once again. Now you can see we have provided our IAM role, we have attached our instance profile, but what it says, when calling the describe VPC operation, you are not authorized to perform this operation. Means even after we have provided the IAM role, the instance profile, still we are unable to access the VPC details. Why? Because this is our IAM role and here we have provided the permission to access S3 bucket but not the VPC. So we will be adding one more permission here, that is VPC, and just click on this VPC full access, attach this one. Now we have attached the access to the VPC. Now let's run the same command again. Just click on this. We'll just try it again. Okay, now we are able to access all the details of the VPCs. This is because of the IAM roles what we have attached to the EC2 instance. So before we finish up this lecture, let's clear everything whatever we have created. Just click on server, click on instance state and click on terminate state. Now go to the IAM role and this role we created, so just delete it, underscore S3 bucket, delete. Apart from that, we have not created lambda function. So I hope you like the video. If you like the video, please like it, share this, and if you are not subscribed to my channel, please subscribe to my channel. Thanks a lot guys. Bye bye.